Jon often replayed the Red Priest's rambling words in his mind, warnings about dragons, wars, and a realm on the brink. Perhaps it was the man's fervor that had lent those prophecies a gloss of immediacy. Yet here they stood, in a time and place where not all the predictions aligned. Daenerys Targaryen had indeed hatched her dragons, but the war the Red Priest predicted in Westeros had not come to pass. Instead, King Robert Baratheon had just now traveled to Winterfell to speak with Ned Stark about Jon Arryn's death. That hardly sounded like a realm aflame. "It seems we listened too keenly to the ramblings of a mad priest," Jon murmured one windy morning aboard the small ship that bore him, Daenerys, and their retinue across the narrow sea. They were sailing once more, bound for Braavos after a harried departure from Pentos. Daenerys, standing at the deck rail with a green-gold hatchling perched on her shoulder, turned to him with a faint smile. "We have yet to see whether his words are madness or foresight," she countered. "The glimpses he spoke of might only be a taste of what lies ahead. Just because King Robert's arrival in Winterfell is calm does not mean the future is free from war. Perhaps the storm is merely gathering." Her voice carried a mixture of awe and caution. She had grown into someone who saw the world's complexities, and as the mother of 3 newly hatched dragons, Daenerys had reason to credit dark prophecies. Jon exhaled softly. The day felt colder than it should have. "You may be right," he admitted. "The realm can be slow to awaken, but once it stirs, events can move quickly. Still, for now, the Red Priest's vision of immediate chaos in the Seven Kingdoms seems off. We must remain watchful." They left it at that, each lost in private thoughts. Varys loitered near the helm, adjusting his cloak against the chill breeze. Torrhen, the Red Priest who had aided Daenerys' hatching ceremony, stood further aft, head bowed in silent prayer. Viserys had chosen to stay below deck, presumably nursing his wounded pride after repeated arguments about the dragons. The freedmen who guarded Daenerys' hatchlings ventured occasionally above to sniff the salt air but mostly lingered to ensure her safety at all times. Jon sometimes caught them exchanging uneasy glances, mindful of how tensions with Viserys might erupt at any moment. After a day's voyage, the ship neared the Titan of Braavos, that colossal sentinel carved in pale stone. The seaward approach to the city's lagoon always awed travelers. Braavos sprawled behind the Titan, canals glittering in the midday sun. A swirl of gulls circled overhead, squawking in the brisk air. Jon inhaled, half relieved and half tense. Braavos was not wholly safe. No city in Essos truly was, but at least here they might find some respite from Pentos' intrigues. Daenerys cradled the green hatchling, wrapping it in a warm cloth so no curious eyes would spy its scales. The dockside throng in Braavos was as loud and jostling as ever. Fishermen hawked their catches, and merchants offloaded crates from half a dozen vessels. Their small ship glided into a less busy wharf, one which Varys had chosen with typical discretion. The freedmen helped the Targaryens disembark. Torrhen walked behind them, carrying a bundle of incense. Viserys emerged at last, muttering about how filthy Braavos smelled, but made no further scene. By unspoken agreement, they found a modest inn near the Purple Harbor, one of the quieter districts with narrow alleys. Jon wanted to slip into the city unnoticed, mindful of rumors that might swirl if passers-by spotted Daenerys' dragons or recognized Targaryen hair. "Rest for the night," Jon suggested once they had settled. "In the morning, I'll journey outside the city to check on Shadowfire. I've left him in that remote cove for too long. He grows impatient." Daenerys nodded. "I'll accompany you," she began, but the freedman reminded her of the 3 young hatchlings, who required near-constant feeding and warmth. With a reluctant sigh, she admitted she couldn't leave them for extended hours. "We just arrived, and I must ensure they stay safe," she said. "Bring back news of your dragon's condition. Perhaps soon we can reunite them all." Jon placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I will. Shadowfire might be restless, but I'd rather plan carefully than risk him swooping over Braavos unannounced." Daenerys agreed, though her longing to see the colossal black dragon remained plain on her face. Viserys, predictably, offered no help. He locked himself in an upstairs room at the inn, likely plotting a fresh rant about how Daenerys was overshadowing him with her hatchlings. Varys said he had personal errands to run, presumably checking the local whisper networks. Tormund accompanied Jon partway through the lamplit streets, explaining that he felt a calling to see the Black Dragon again. "Something in the flames," Tormund murmured, "pulls me to the great beast. Perhaps Lawler weaves our steps for a higher purpose." At dawn, they left Braavos by a narrow gate, climbing into rented horses. The freedmen who had guarded Shadowfire in Jon's absence were expecting them near a rocky shoreline miles from the city. Tormund rode quietly, occasionally humming a low chant. Jon felt the tension in his spine ease as they left the city's bustle behind. The road was rough, meandering past stunted trees and marshy patches. Seabirds wheeled overhead, crying in the salty wind. After a couple of hours, they ascended a small rise, from which Jon spotted the cove's jagged outline. Smoke billowed there, black as pitch. Jon's heart pounded. Shadowfire must be hunting or scorching driftwood. That was never a good sign. They descended carefully. The freedmen's makeshift camp came into view, a cluster of tents pitched atop high ground to avoid flooding. One of the freedmen, a tall woman named Sarah, hurried forward to greet them. "My prince, we worried you might not return soon enough," she said, voice taut with concern. "Shadowfire grows restless. He hunts whales farther out at sea, but he's been roaring at night." Jon nodded gravely. "I feared as much. Thank you for holding the camp." He dismounted, scanning the cove. "Where is he now?" A thunderous roar answered that question. From behind a craggy outcrop, the Black Dragon emerged, massive wings beating the air with gale-force gusts. Shadowfire was bigger than Jon remembered, which was saying something. The freedmen ducked behind tents to avoid the buffeting wind. Tormund's eyes shone with awe. As the beast landed, the ground trembled. Its obsidian scales shimmered like polished armor. It regarded Jon with molten eyes, letting out a deep, rumbling growl that rattled the air. Jon raised his arms, stepping forward. "Easy, boy," he called, though calling such a colossal creature a boy was laughable. Shadowfire lowered its neck, allowing Jon to rest a hand on the scales. A wash of heat radiated from the dragon's body. Jon felt an odd flicker of relief. They had parted for too long. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "We've had complicated business in Pentos." Tormund approached reverently, dropping to one knee a few yards back. He whispered a prayer. "Lawler's flames hold you in their warmth, O greatest of dragons." Shadowfire snorted, exhaling a hot gust that smelled of sulfur and rotting fish. The freedmen kept a respectful distance, remembering how easily the beast could incinerate a man. Jon examined the dragon's hide. There were fresh scars along the flank, likely from whales or giant squid it had hunted. Shadowfire's wings were unscathed, their membrane intact and stronger than ever. The freedmen said the dragon had soared far out to sea, devouring entire schools of fish or occasionally a passing whale. "We left you fish," Sarah explained, "but he always wants more, prowling day and night." Jon sighed. Shadowfire's appetite had always been legendary, and each growth spurt made it fiercer. Tormund rose, still trembling with awe. "My prince, the Lord of Light's flame spoke of your bond with this dragon. Yet never did I imagine such sheer size. If Daenerys' hatchlings grow to even half this scale, the world will be reshaped." Jon brushed aside the notion. "We're far from forging an empire. The realm is stable enough for now. King Robert is only just investigating Jon Arryn's death in Winterfell." He recalled the Red Priest's earlier prophecies, which declared that dragons reemerged amidst raging war. This might not be the all-consuming conflict that was prophesied. It could be the prelude, or maybe the priest was wrong entirely. Tormund placed a hand on Jon's shoulder. "Prophecies rarely unfold as we expect. The world's tapestry is vast, my prince. Wait and see. The seeds of strife can bloom swiftly." Jon nodded, stroking Shadowfire's scales. "For now, we must keep him hidden or at least away from curious eyes. Soon, Daenerys hopes to bring her hatchlings here, to unify them in one place." The freedmen exchanged uneasy glances. 6 dragons if one counted the 3 new hatchlings, the single black egg that had been rumored in Winterfell, plus anything else the Targaryens conjured. The realm indeed might quake. Just then, a group of robed figures appeared at the edge of the cove. Red priests, by the look of them. They carried torches despite the daylight. Their leader, a tall man with shaved head and an ornate necklace, raised his arms in greeting. Torm squinted. "My brothers, but I did not summon them." Jon tensed, stepping closer to Shadowfire for a moment. The freedmen hurried to intercept the newcomers, but the robed man called out, "We mean no harm. We are of the Red Temple in Braavos. We come seeking Jon Targaryen, rider of the Black Dragon." Jon signaled for the freedmen to stand down. "Why do you seek me?" The robed man bowed. "I am Halder, a servant of R'hllor. We have gleaned from the flames a sign. Your direwolf, the white-furred beast, yet lives." Jon's heart skipped. "That cannot be. Ghost died months ago, attacked by Shadowbinders. I saw the body." Halder's expression remained gentle but firm. "The Lord of Light has power beyond death. We Red Priests have been guided to preserve that wolf's remains in a hidden place. Our brothers recognized a spark. With your presence, we might complete the resurrection." Torm let out a startled breath. "Resurrection? I have heard tales, but rarely do they succeed without madness or ill effect." He glanced at Jon. "Do you trust them?" Jon's memories of Ghost weighed heavy. The direwolf had been his closest companion in the early days, when he first found the dragon egg and wrestled with identity. "If there's even a chance it's true," he began, swallowing. "I must see." Shadowfire rumbled as if sensing Jon's emotions, but the freedmen parted to allow the Red Priests forward. "We come to guide you," Halder said, "to our hidden crypt beneath the old temple. Your presence is essential to restore the wolf's spirit." Jon blinked, hope and apprehension mingling. "Then lead me." He turned to Torm. "I'll go. Can you stay and see that Shadowfire remains calm?" Torm hesitated. "If these priests intend no harm, I'll trust them. But let me accompany you part of the way. I know them not." Jon agreed. After reassuring Sarah and the freedmen that he would return soon, he followed Halder and his robed companions along a narrow path inland. Torm trailed behind warily. Shadowfire let out a bellow but did not follow. The cove vanished behind rocky hills as they pressed on. The Red Priest spoke little, focusing on leading Jon across a barren stretch of land toward a cluster of ancient ruins. They arrived at a jagged entrance carved into the hillside, remnants of some ancient city lost to time. The priests lit fresh torches, descending a twisting stone stair. Torm hung back near the top. "Go, my prince. I shall remain here to keep watch. If R'hllor wills this, so be it." Jon took a torch from the priest's heart hammering. Damp air greeted him, smelling of earth and salt. They wound through corridors etched with faded glyphs. Occasionally, flickers of red script reminiscent of R'hllor's iconography appeared on the walls. At last, they entered a vaulted chamber lit by braziers that glowed with unsettling crimson light. A stone slab stood at the center, and on it lay a huge shape covered in cloth. A single priest knelt at the slab's foot, chanting softly. Halder gestured for Jon to approach. Closer now, Jon saw the outline of a wolf's form beneath the cloth. The pang in his chest deepened. Ghost had been a white direwolf with keen red eyes, but Jon had thought him lost forever. He parted the cloth and felt a knife of grief at the sight. It was indeed Ghost's body. Ribs visible, fur stained, flesh partially mummified by whatever processes the priests had used. Jon inhaled sharply. "How is this possible?" he whispered. "He died in Essos, far from here." Halder's voice reverberated in the hollow space. "We have watchers across the land. When your wolf fell, certain of our acolytes found him. They knew Ghost bore significance to the Lord of Light's champion, a champion who tamed a dragon. We placed him in stasis with prayer and special bombs, awaiting the day we could attempt a resurrection if you returned." Jon, numb with shock, rested a hand on the direwolf's flank. It was cold, stiff. "What do I do?" Halder beckoned 2 other priests forward. They carried bowls of thick oil and carved obsidian daggers. "We pray," the priest said, "and we open a path for the wolf spirit. You must offer your blood to guide him back." John's throat tightened. He recalled old tales of R'hlloreth's powers, how some red priests revived men from the brink of death. But a wolf? He thought of Daenerys hatching her dragons. Perhaps miracles were possible. "I'll do it," he said hoarsely. "What must I do?" Halder directed him to stand at the slab's head, Ghost's muzzle near his hand. Another priest gently pried open the direwolf's jaws, placing a piece of heated obsidian inside, chanting in Valyrian. Halder grasped John's wrist, slicing a shallow cut with the obsidian dagger, letting blood drip onto the wolf's fur. The braziers flared, stinging John's eyes. A pungent incense filled the air. The chanting rose in intensity, echoing off the vaulted ceiling. John felt his pulse hammering, as though some invisible force pulled at him. Moments stretched into an eternity. The direwolf's body remained motionless. The priests chanted faster, some kneeling, others raising their hands to the flickering braziers. John's cut bled steadily, saturating Ghost's matted fur. He clenched his teeth, ignoring the sting. "Ghost," he whispered, tears pricking his eyes. "If you can hear me, come back. I never meant to leave you behind." Suddenly, the braziers guttered, plunging the chamber into near darkness. A hush fell, broken only by the ragged breathing of the priests. Then Ghost's body twitched. John's heart lurched. He watched as the direwolf's hind leg jerked, then fell still again. One priest gasped, renewed chanting. Halder poured a measure of heated oil across Ghost's chest. The scent of burnt fur rose, nauseating, but John didn't move. This might be the threshold. With a strangled groan, the wolf's flank rose and fell, a shallow breath. John stepped back, unsure whether to rejoice or recoil. The priests circled, murmuring incantations. Another breath, stronger now, rattled through Ghost's ribcage. The direwolf's eyes fluttered open, dull red orbs that seemed unfocused. A trembling shudder ran along its limbs. John released a shaky exhale. "Ghost," he whispered again, leaning in. Slowly, haltingly, the wolf turned its head, snout brushing John's arm. The eyes glowed faintly. A hushed sense of awe gripped John. The dire wolf was not quite alive in the usual sense. There was a strange tension about its form, a dryness in the fur. But it breathed, stared, recognized him. Halder's voice wavered. "It is done, or as done as mortal means allow. The wolf spirit answers your call. In time, he may grow stronger." John touched the direwolf's neck, feeling a faint pulse. Ghost gave a low, rasping whine, half pain, half relief. The stench of incense and burnt fur clung to them both. John struggled to find words. "I thank you," he managed. "Can he walk? Is he truly himself?" The priest nodded solemnly. "He needs rest, care, and your presence. Over time, yes, his essence may heal. But do not forget, his body was dead. The Lord of Light has granted him a second chance, though scars may linger." John let out a tremulous laugh, half disbelieving. He slid an arm beneath Ghost's chest, helping the wolf rise from the slab. Ghost wobbled, hind legs unsteady, but managed to stand. The direwolf's fur was patchy, with bald spots and blackened edges. Yet John recognized the proud arch of that head, the intelligence in those blood-red eyes. Tears blurred his vision. "Welcome back, old friend," he breathed. The priest stepped away, exhausted. Halder wiped sweat from his brow. "We have done our part. The wolf belongs to you, champion of R'hllor. Perhaps your journeys will need him yet. Go in the Lord's light." John bowed in gratitude, though confusion warred within him. He was not sure he believed wholeheartedly in R'hlloreth's dominion, but he couldn't deny this miracle. The priests parted, letting him guide Ghost toward the corridor. The dire wolf leaned against him, trembling as though every motion was strange. The walk back up those twisting steps was slow. Torum stood guard at the entrance, When he saw the resurrected direwolf limping beside Jon, his eyes widened in shock. By the flames, it's true they brought him back. Jon nodded, voice unsteady. He's changed, but alive. Torrum gently touched Ghost's muzzle, and the wolf growled softly. Let him get used to the world again, the Red Priest advised. We should hurry back to Shadowfire's cove. The wolf needs warmth and time to heal. They hurried across the ruins, Jon half carrying Ghost. The sun was lower now, casting elongated shadows. Once they reached the cove, Sarah gasped at the sight of the half-burned direwolf padding behind Jon. Shadowfire let out a thunderous roar at the newcomers. Ghost flinched, hackles raised. The freedmen scrambled to keep a safe distance from both beasts. Jon realized they couldn't linger here. The direwolf might provoke the giant dragon or vice versa, especially in Ghost's weakened state. Jon made a swift decision. We're returning to Braavos, he told Sarah. The freedmen can remain with Shadowfire, but the wolf needs shelter and time. We'll be gone by nightfall if we hurry. Sarah nodded, though worry flickered across her face. As you wish, my prince. I'll ensure the dragon stays calm. Jon mounted his horse, cradling Ghost across his lap. Torrum took the reins of the second horse. The freedmen provided them a bit of dried meat and a flask of water. With final instructions to guard Shadowfire meticulously, Jon and Torrum departed. The direwolf dozed, stirring occasionally with a faint whimper. Jon stroked the patchy fur, promising silently that he'd help Ghost regain some semblance of life. They reached the outskirts of Braavos after sunset, passing watchful city guards who barely glanced at them, preoccupied with a drunken brawl in another street. Torrum parted ways with Jon near the Purple Harbor, murmuring that he needed to rejoin his brethren for more rites. Jon thanked him for the help and continued alone, carrying Ghost. The direwolf stirred at the city's sights and smells, but too feebly to protest. On the final approach to the inn, Jon encountered an unusual sight. A group of mercenaries clad in piecemeal armor, loitering outside. They wore a distinctive sigil, 3 intertwined swords. Jon recognized it vaguely as belonging to a lesser-known Sellsword company. Their leader, a flamboyantly attired man with blue hair and a curved sword at his hip, stood out. He noticed Jon, raised a gloved hand in greeting. "Hail," he called. "You must be the Targaryen dragon rider I've heard whispers about." Jon halted, shifting Ghost's weight. "Who asks?" The man smirked. "I am Daario Naharis, captain of the Second Sons. We roam Essos, contracting our blades to those who pay well, or to those guided by fate. And I suspect fate guides me to you." Jon eyed him warily. "The Lord of Light told you this?" Daario's grin widened. "In a manner of speaking, I've had dreams, visions, a figure astride a gargantuan black dragon, unstoppable, and a swirl of flame that devours armies. I recognized your face from rumor. No man could stand against a beast that large. So I've come to offer our services." Ghost stirred, whining. Daario gave the direwolf a curious look. "And I see you have other curiosities. A direwolf in Braavos? Hardly common. But no matter. The Second Sons follow me, and I follow the scent of power. You, my friend, have it." Jon let out a slow breath. "We are not openly recruiting an army. If you've heard talk of a Targaryen presence, you must also know we keep it discreet." Daario nodded vigorously. "Of course, but let's say I'm a gambler. I smell greatness brewing with your cause. Rumor says you hold not just one monstrous dragon but also allies who've hatched new ones. The Second Sons prefer to join a rising sun, not a dying ember. The Lord of Light, or whomever, points me to you." Jon didn't trust Sellsword captains readily. "And you expect gold, I assume. My resources are limited." Daario wagged a finger. "Gold helps, sure, but sometimes we want more than coin. We want glory. And if you have dragons, especially one rumored bigger than any creature since Balerion, then we see a future full of possibilities. I'm not squeamish about how we achieve victory, so long as we stand on the winning side." Jon studied the man's eyes in the torchlight. Daario seemed cunning, flamboyant, but sincere enough in his mercenary ambition. Even if that path leads to confrontation with the Iron Throne of Westeros? Dario laughed softly. Essos or Westeros, a contract's a contract. My men want spoils and a cause worth fighting for. If you truly aim to restore House Targaryen, the Second Sons could make a name for themselves. The other Sellsword companies, Golden Company, Stormcrows, Freed Brothers, some might flock to you, others might fight you. I prefer to get in early. Ghost let out a faint growl at the strangers, but Jon stroked the direwolf's head. All right, he said quietly. Walk with me. I can't stand here all night. My direwolf needs rest. Dario signaled his men to stay put, stepping forward alone. He fell into step with Jon as they crossed the threshold into the inn's yard. Soft lamplight illuminated the corners. Jon led him to a quiet stable area, where he carefully set Ghost down on a bed of straw. The direwolf shuddered, adjusting to the new environment. Dario watched with mild curiosity, then turned to Jon. It looks half dead, he said without malice. Is it safe? Jon shot him a sharp look. He was dead. The Red Priests resurrected him. Now he needs to recover. Keep your distance if you value your hand. Dario shrugged with a rakish grin. As you say, I mean no disrespect. Sellswords see all manner of oddities in Essos, but that's a first. They stepped away from the stable, heading toward the inn's main door. Dario lowered his voice. How can I prove the Second Son's sincerity? Perhaps an oath in blood? We do such things from time to time, but I sense you want more than bravado. Jon paused before opening the door. The idea of forging an alliance with yet another Sellsword company unsettled him. Daenerys' hatchlings were still vulnerable, and Viserys remained unpredictable. But Dario's mention of the Lord of Light guiding him suggested there might be more at play. I'll speak with Daenerys Targaryen, Jon said. She is at the heart of our cause. If we deem it wise, we'll meet your men. If not, you'll have to find your fortune elsewhere. Dario bowed theatrically. As you wish. We'll be in Braavos a while, frequenting the Guildhall Square. Seek me out when you're ready. But mark my words. No man can stand against that dragon I've heard rumored, and the Second Sons want in on the unstoppable side. Jon nodded curtly, pushing open the door. Dario flashed a grin and disappeared into the night. The inn's common room was quiet. A handful of patrons hunched over drinks. A hush settled as Jon walked through, direwolf blood staining his clothes, though Ghost remained outside in the stable. He spotted Daenerys at a corner table, nursing a cup of watered wine. She wore a dark cloak, and her silver-gold hair caught the lamplight. Relief lit her features when she saw Jon approach. You're back, she said softly, rising to meet him. You were gone longer than I expected. Did you find Shadowfire well? And is that blood on you? Concern laced her voice. Jon guided her to a more private alcove. Shadowfire is fine, as big and restless as ever. But that's not the main news. He inhaled, preparing to break the revelation. A group of Red Priests found me. They claimed they resurrected Ghost. I saw his body. He's alive. Daenerys. Changed, but breathing. Her eyes widened, shining with empathy. Ghost? Truly? That's incredible. She clasped his hands. Where is he? In the stable out back. He's weak and he's not exactly as he was. The priest said he needs time, but the direwolf recognized me. Jon's tone turned husky with emotion. I didn't think I'd ever see him again. Daenerys squeezed his hands in shared joy. You must be so relieved. R'hlloreth's power defies understanding. Then she frowned at the bloody stains. Are you hurt? Jon shook his head, showing her the shallow cut on his wrist. Part of the ritual. I'm fine, but I'll need a bandage. She beckoned him to sit, carefully cleaning the wound with water from a small basin the innkeeper had provided. Her gentle care reminded him how much the dynamic between them had shifted. Once near strangers, now bound by secrets and shared burdens. When she finished wrapping his wrist, Jon recounted the entire tale. The Red Priest's crypt, the chanting, the direwolf's revival. Daenerys's eyes flickered with wonder and mild apprehension. "It mirrors the miraculous hatching of my dragons," she noted quietly. "All these signs swirling around us. Perhaps the Red Priest was not wholly mad about a destiny unfolding." Jon bit his lip. "Maybe. We still see no war raging in Westeros, though." Robert merely visited Ned Stark. "Hardly the inferno that Priest promised." Daenerys nodded. "Yes, but there's no telling what tomorrow brings. War can erupt from small sparks." She leaned back, letting out a weary sigh. "And Viserys? He's sulking in his room again. At least he hasn't stirred up trouble tonight." Jon grimaced. "Good. We have enough to handle. I should check on Ghost now, make sure he's comfortable. Oh, and one more bit of news. I met Daario Naharis of the Second Sons outside. He claims the Lord of Light guided him to me. He wants to pledge his mercenaries to our cause." Daenerys's eyebrows rose. "Truly? Another Sellsword company, on top of the Golden Company's interest? That's complicated. We can't parade the dragons for every opportunist. But if the Second Sons are sincere, maybe it's an advantage." "Agreed," Jon replied. "We don't want to push them away, but we also can't allow them to meddle. Let's see how they behave." Daario seems flamboyant, but not necessarily untrustworthy. They parted after a few more words. Daenerys offered to bring scraps of meat for Ghost. Jon returned to the stable, lighting a lantern. The direwolf lay on a makeshift bed of straw, eyes half open, breathing raggedly. He gave a faint wag of the tail, though it was more like a twitch. Jon knelt, stroking the patchy fur. "We're together again," he said softly. "Rest easy, Ghost. I'll watch over you this time." Daenerys soon arrived, carrying a small platter of leftover scraps. Bits of mutton, fish, and bread soaked in broth. She set it near the wolf's muzzle, coaxing him gently. Ghost sniffed uncertainly, then lapped up some broth. A flicker of relief crossed Daenerys's face. "He still knows hunger," she whispered. "That's a good sign." Jon offered her a thankful smile. The stable was dim, yet their combined presence felt oddly comforting. Outside, Braavos' night lapsed into silence, broken only by distant canal sounds. They lingered, ensuring Ghost ate as much as he could. At last, the direwolf curled up, drifting into a restless sleep. Jon took Daenerys' hand, guiding her back into the inn. "He'll be all right," he murmured, mostly to reassure himself. The next few days passed in a haze of careful routines. Jon spent hours tending Ghost, aiding the direwolf's slow recovery. Daenerys looked infrequently, bringing warm cloths or leftover scraps. Viserys continued sulking and occasionally snapping at Jon for ignoring the cause. Meanwhile, Tormund occasionally stopped by to offer Lollaress blessing, though he had no direct link to the group who resurrected Ghost. Varys flitted around Braavos, gathering rumors. One evening, he confirmed that Robert Baratheon still lingered in Winterfell, forging deeper ties with Ned Stark. No widespread conflict had erupted. "For now, the capital remains stable," Varys said quietly. "But small seeds may yet bloom. We cannot guess when the realm will tip." Daenerys sometimes repeated her earlier stance. The Red Priest's visions were not undone, only delayed. Jon half believed it, half hoped it would remain quiet. The dragons, particularly Daenerys' hatchlings, were not ready for a great war. She needed time to raise them. Shadowfire, for his part, might break half the realm's armies if unleashed, but that would only stoke chaos. Jon loathed the idea of a massacre. Meanwhile, Daario Naharis reappeared intermittently, pestering Jon about forging an alliance. On the third evening, Jon finally arranged to meet him at a small tavern near the moon pool. Daario arrived with two of his lieutenants, each sporting flamboyant hair dyes and exotic weapons. They drank sweet wine, boasting about the Second Son's prowess. Jon listened politely, sipping only water. "We have 500 skilled mercenaries," Daario said. "Archers, swordsmen, a handful of mounted cavalry. Not as large as the Golden Company, but more flexible. And we don't have old grudges to weigh us down." Jon tapped the table. Daenerys Targaryen's dragons are young. Our cause is not poised to march on Westeros tomorrow. Will the Second Sons be patient? Daario shrugged. For a time, if we see progress. We're not charity, but we believe in riding the wave before it crests. If you reveal your monstrous black dragon to the men, I guarantee their loyalty. They fear no man, but a dragon? That's beyond mortal ken. Jon frowned. Fear alone is an uncertain foundation. We prefer allies who share a vision, not just trembling terror. Daario gave a lazy grin. We follow coin and destiny. If your destiny is real, no man will stand against you. So far, I see reason to believe. Consider us at your disposal, provided we see reason to stay. You can pay in coin or spoils, or a future arrangement once you reclaim the Targaryen throne. We'll be flexible. Jon let out a small sigh. I can't promise an immediate retainer, but if Daenerys agrees, we can formalize a pact that, once House Targaryen regains power, the Second Sons are duly rewarded. Splendid, Daario said. Let me show you good faith. If ever bandits or sellswords trouble you in Bravos, call on us. We'll dispatch them swiftly. He held out a hand. Jon hesitated, then shook it. Daario looked delighted. A partial alliance, then. I look forward to meeting your queen. Or is it you who claims kingship? Jon glanced away, recalling the complexities of his lineage. We share Targaryen blood. For now, that's enough. Daenerys is the mother of dragons, and I have my own role. He ended the conversation, feeling wary. Still, he parted on seemingly friendly terms. Daario and his men swaggered off into the moonlit streets, already boasting about future glories. When Jon returned to the inn, he found Daenerys in the main room, sipping tea. She lifted an eyebrow. Daario again? Yes, Jon replied, taking a seat. He wants formal ties. I told him we need time, but he's determined. I suspect he's starstruck by the idea of unstoppable dragons. Daenerys gave a half-smile. The unstoppable part remains to be seen. My 3 are growing fast, but they're hardly the size to burn armies yet. And your Shadowfire remains distant. We must unify them eventually. If we do ally with the Second Sons, we must handle it carefully. Viserys will see it as a step toward war. I'd rather not be rushed. Jon nodded. Agreed. We can't let him manipulate the sellswords. We might have to keep the arrangements quiet. Daenerys exhaled. I'm tired of secrecy, but we have no choice. Each day, I feed my dragons, watch them stretch their wings, and wonder if I'm raising instruments of salvation or destruction. She looked at him earnestly. We must be sure. Jon gently rested a hand over hers. I've wrestled with the same question since Shadowfire hatched. Let's take it one step at a time. She nodded, relaxing slightly. They shared a moment of quiet understanding before parting ways for the night. Viserys discovered the budding alliance with the Second Sons soon enough, though. He cornered Jon in the corridor, bristling. You're forging deals behind my back again? Daario told me you met. These men should be mine to command. I am the rightful king. Jon ground his teeth. You talk of kingship, yet you do little but complain. If you want to lead the Second Sons, show them a reason to follow you. Standing around bellowing about your birthright won't help. Viserys raised a hand threateningly, but Jon didn't flinch. A sneer curved the older Targaryen's lips. You forget your place, nephew. The dragons, the sellswords, they're all mine by rights. You keep me at arm's length while you and my sister form your own empire. Jon's temper simmered. Daenerys refuses to let you treat the hatchlings like war toys. Your tantrums accomplish nothing. Viserys glared, fists clenched, then spun on his heel and stormed off. The freedmen in the hallway stepped aside, unimpressed by his theatrics. Jon exhaled, wondering if it was inevitable that Viserys would betray them. For now, Daenerys' presence kept him from outright hostility, but the tension thickened with each passing day. Meanwhile, Ghost slowly regained strength, though his fur remained patchy and his eyes glowed with an unsettling intensity. Some nights he whimpered, as though haunted by whatever lay beyond death. Jon stayed with him, offering comfort. Daenerys occasionally joined them, letting Ghost sniff her hand. She showed no fear, only compassion for the resurrected direwolf. Viserys never visited. Tormund offered blessings, but the direwolf seemed skittish around most Red Priests. Halder's group that had performed the resurrection did not reappear, though rumors circulated that they were traveling beyond Braavos to perform other tasks in R'hlloreth's name. One afternoon, Varys returned with urgent news. "King Robert has left Winterfell," he told Jon and Daenerys in hushed tones. "Word says Ned Stark has agreed to become Hand of the King. They're journeying south to King's Landing, so the realm remains stable, but the shift in power might cause ripples. Some suspect foul play in Jon Arryn's death. Perhaps it's the first hint of deeper unrest." Daenerys looked thoughtful. A new Hand of the King might discover secrets that incite conflict. The realm could yet face a storm, even if the Red Priest's timeline was off. Jon crossed his arms. Or it could remain a simple shuffle of court positions. We can't gamble on chaos in Westeros. We must focus on our next move in Essos. The freedmen chimed in that Shadowfire's Cove grew more hazardous with each passing day. Fishermen whispered of a massive black shape in the water. If local lords or petty sellswords got wind, they might track the dragon for profit. Jon bit his lip, torn between two concerns: Shadowfire's secrecy and Daenerys' hatchlings in Braavos. Sooner or later, he'd have to bring them together in a remote stronghold. But how? That question remained unanswered. Late that night, Daenerys found Jon in the stable with Ghost, tending a fresh wound the direwolf had inflicted upon himself while stumbling around. She lingered by the doorway, arms folded, face etched with worry. "I've been thinking," she began softly. "It's time we moved on. Braavos is not safe for us or our dragons. We cannot remain hidden in corners forever." Jon rose, wiping blood from his hands. "I agree. We must find a place beyond prying eyes. The Red Waste, perhaps, or some uninhabited corner of Essos. But traveling with 5 dragons, Shadowfire plus your 3 hatchlings, plus if we consider..." He trailed off, recalling that a rumor persisted about another egg or more relics. "It'll be a massive undertaking." Daenerys nodded. "We can hire ships discreetly. Dario's second sons can provide security. Once we're far from any city, the dragons can roam freely. They'll grow faster with open skies." Viserys might object, but if he refuses, he can stay behind. Jon let out a shaky breath. If he stays, he might stir trouble or attempt to follow. But we can't let him sabotage us any longer. He recalled the times Viserys nearly harmed her hatchlings. "All right, let's plan. We can talk with Illyrio again, or we can rely on Varys to arrange ships. If the freedmen and the second sons cooperate, we can do it swiftly." Daenerys' relief was palpable. "Yes, let's do so. We'll slip away from Braavos as soon as possible. I'll gather the hatchlings, hide them in crates. You see to Shadowfire. We can rendezvous near the coast." Jon clasped her hand. "We'll manage it carefully. In a matter of days, we'll vanish from Braavos and head someplace we can truly unite the dragons. Perhaps then these prophecies, mad or not, will find their course." She offered a hopeful smile. "Indeed, and if the realm in Westeros remains quiet, so be it. We'll be prepared for any storms that arise." Over the following days, the plan took shape. Varys remained skeptical but agreed to secure 2 ships under false manifests. Dario's second sons offered to escort them out of Braavos. They asked for a show of the Black Dragon, but Jon refused, promising they'd see it en route. Daenerys prepared to crate her 3 hatchlings, carefully ensuring they had enough air and warmth. The freedmen near Shadowfire were alerted by Messenger Raven, told to be ready to move. Everything hinged on stealth and speed. Viserys must not sabotage them. On the eve of their departure, Viserys cornered Daenerys in the inn's cramped hallway. Jon arrived just in time to overhear. "You dare plan to flee Braavos with our dragons behind my back?" Viserys hissed. "I am the king, not you." Daenerys squared her shoulders. "No, brother. You are a Targaryen prince, but I will not kneel to your madness. We leave tomorrow. If you insist on continuing your petty tyranny, stay behind. Viserys' face twisted with fury. You would cast me out? The rightful heir, replaced by your bastard nephew and your brood of hatchlings. He raised a hand as if to strike her, but Daenerys lifted her chin, unafraid. Jon stepped in, snatching Viserys' wrist. That's enough, Jon growled, wrenching the older man's arm aside. Daenerys leads this expedition, with or without you. Raise a hand to her again, and I'll let the freedmen remove you forcibly. Viserys, trembling, yanked free. I see how it is. Very well. I'll come, but don't think I've yielded. One day I will take what is mine. The dragons obey me, not your illusions. He spat at the floor and stalked off, leaving Daenerys sagging with relief. Jon gently placed a hand on her shoulder. We must watch him closely tomorrow. He might attempt something desperate. She nodded, tears threatening to spill. I'm tired of living in fear of him. Jon pulled her into a brief embrace, letting her steadiness return. Soon, we'll be away from these crowded streets. The dragons will be free to soar, and Viserys' tantrums will be overshadowed. At dawn, the group slipped from the inn. Daenerys carried one hatchling in her arms, too agitated to stay in the crate, while the freedmen managed the other two in lidded boxes lined with blankets. Jon led Ghost, who limped but refused to be left behind. Torrhen accompanied them, chanting quiet prayers. Varys walked ahead, scouting. Dario and a small squad of second sons flanked them, more for show than real protection. No one wanted a street fight in Braavos. Viserys rode near the back, glowering. The sky was overcast, the lagoon waters still as glass. They boarded the waiting ships with minimal fuss. The captains, bribed heavily by Varys, asked no questions about cargo. Within an hour, the ships slipped out of Braavos' harbor, guided by faint breezes. Daenerys stood on the quarterdeck, arms wrapped around the green hatchling, gazing at the Titan's colossal silhouette receding behind them. Jon joined her, Ghost at his side, leaning on the rail. We did it, he murmured. Where do we go? She swallowed. Far enough from any city that we can land and gather Shadowfire. Then, perhaps deeper into Essos, beyond the Dothraki Sea or near the Red Waste. We'll decide once we see how the dragons fare. Viserys prowled the forecastle, occasionally shouting at a freedman or a second son's mercenary. Dario watched him with amusement, arms folded. The tension made Jon uneasy, but the immediate danger of Braavos was behind them. He only hoped they could slip away to that deserted shoreline without incident. After 2 days at sea, they neared the cove. The freedmen on Shadowfire's side signaled with mirrors from the cliffs. All was ready. Jon steeled himself. Unloading a black dragon of that size would be no small feat. Daenerys' hatchlings smelled the shore, hissing in anticipation. The green one flapped about on deck, nearly igniting a coil of rope with a tiny burst of flame. Freedmen scrambled to keep it contained. Daenerys scolded the hatchling gently, though she couldn't hide a hint of pride. Dario's eyes widened in amazement at the hatchling's display. You truly carry living fire, he muttered. My men are impressed, and maybe a bit terrified. Jon only grunted in reply, mind racing with logistics. Once they disembarked, they'd unite with Shadowfire. But how to transport all dragons further inland? Possibly on foot, though the big dragon might need to fly overhead. That posed a risk if Watchers saw. Yet no safe alternative came to mind. Daenerys recognized the dilemma, meeting Jon's gaze. She gave a small shrug. There was no turning back now. The ships anchored offshore. They used rowboats to reach the beach. The freedmen led Daenerys, her hatchlings, and Ghost onto dry land. Dario and his men followed, eyes scanning for threats. Then came Viserys, snapping at a oarsman for nearly splashing him. Jon hung back, the last to land, ensuring everything was secure. The moment he stepped onto the sand, a roar shattered the air. Shadowfire, swooping low from the cliff edge. The monstrous dragon's wings battered the clouds, stirring a fierce wind that nearly overturned a rowboat. Dario cursed in awe, reflexively raising his sword. Jon motioned for calm. "Stay your weapons. That's our ally." Shadowfire landed in a thunderous impact, causing Friedman to stagger. The dragon eyed the new arrivals, hissing. Daenerys's hatchlings squealed in terror or excitement. It was hard to tell. She clutched them protectively. Even the second son's men flinched. Viserys, wide-eyed, stepped back, muttering something half-coherent. Daario approached Jon, dropping his sword. "By the gods," he breathed. "That's bigger than I ever imagined." Jon nodded grimly. "Shadowfire, my bond." He carefully approached the dragon, hand raised. Shadowfire snorted, letting out a gush of hot breath. Daenerys, eyes shining, beckoned her hatchlings close. The little ones hissed uncertainly, but the sight of a colossal elder dragon seemed to transfix them. Jon noted how Shadowfire's gaze flicked to Daenerys, as if acknowledging the new brood. A hush settled as the freedmen and mercenaries beheld the two extremes. One dragon bigger than a ship, 3 that could be cradled in arms. Then Viserys broke it with a bitter laugh. "So this is the famed beast I've heard whispered about, your pet dragon that overshadowed me from the start. Glorious indeed." His tone dripped with envy. Daenerys ignored him, stepping forward. Shadowfire bent its neck, sniffing at the hatchlings. The green one squeaked, shooting a tiny flame that vanished harmlessly against Shadowfire's thick scales. A startled hush followed. Then, to everyone's relief, Shadowfire let out a low rumble that sounded almost amused. The freedmen exhaled. Jon grinned despite the tension. Perhaps the dragon recognized its own kind, even if they were newly hatched. Daario made a show of kneeling. "We commit ourselves to House Targaryen in the name of these dragons. Let any man challenge us if he dares." His men followed suit, though some did so reluctantly. Daenerys gave a solemn nod, though she kept her attention on the dragons. Viserys looked as though he'd swallowed a lemon. He cast Daenerys and Jon an icy glare before turning on his heel, walking away down the beach. The freedmen eyed him warily, but he did not appear immediately dangerous. Jon exhaled, grateful for the moment's peace. Then Daenerys caught Jon's hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "We made it, all of us. Now we press onward." She gestured to the horizon of inland plains. "Somewhere out there, we can forge a place for these dragons to grow." Jon squeezed her hand. "Yes, let's gather supplies, then push inland. With the second sons and freedmen, we can protect them." Torm, arriving late on the beach, knelt in prayer. "R'hlloreth's flame has guided us thus far. Let us not falter." The freedmen began unloading crates from the rowboats. Food, tents, and gear for an extended trek. Daario barked orders to his men, who formed a perimeter. Meanwhile, Shadowfire flapped its wings, stirring the sand into a frenzy. The hatchlings squealed, burying their heads against Daenerys's chest. Everyone braced for the next stage of this uncertain journey. Jon cast one final look seaward. Braavos shrank into memory. King Robert's calm overshadowed far across the narrow sea. Ned Stark stepping into power as hand. Perhaps the realm remained at peace for now, but here, on the sands of Essos, dragons gathered. Daenerys's presence blazed with new confidence. The freedmen and the second sons were forging pacts. Torm read omens in the fire, and Ghost, half-resurrected, padded behind Jon, a silent testament to the miracles and dangers that followed them. War or no war, prophecy or madness, House Targaryen was building a legacy. He inhaled, turned to Daenerys, and nodded. The last boat pulled away. The cove was theirs. With a roar, Shadowfire leapt skyward, shaking the heavens, heralding an age of dragons that might yet fulfill or disprove every prophecy. As the caravan began moving inland, Jon felt the weight of new possibilities, uncertain but determined. Whether King Robert's arrival in Winterfell marked a trivial shift or the start of a vast conflict, they would be ready. Dragons by their side, Direwolf at their heels, forging a path through the unknown.